Well, good morning and thank you for watching here for Live Impact News on this Friday the 13th. We appreciate you watching, whether you are watching us live on YouTube or if you're watching us on our streaming app, 13 News Now Plus. And if you have not downloaded that, go ahead and do so now on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire. I'm joined in studio right now with producer Sarah Calloway and meteorologist Craig Moeller as everybody's gearing up for the Big Love Day, Valentine's Day.
Big Love Day.
The Big Love Day.
That,
Not
yeah.
little love, not medium love, the big love,
Big
Craig.
Love.
That's what we're talking about.
That. Before we get there, though, today is Friday the 13th.
Yes, it is.
And we're going to jump into the forecast. But I need to know, what are you guys most superstitious about with Friday the 13th? Or are you at all?
Sarah, I'll let you take that one first.
I don't think I've
given it much thought?
Yeah, I haven't given it much thought. I
All
think like when you're younger, you're like opening an umbrella inside and that sort of thing. But I wouldn't say I'm superstitious at all.
I would say, as I move the mic closer to my face here, I would say the only thing that I'm even relatively superstitious about is splitting poles or something of that nature, just because it's awkward to me. That has
Splitting
nothing
poles?
to
What do you
yeah
mean?
like if you walk down and there's a pole in between or something and you walk on one side and the other person walks on the other. No, walk on the same side as
I
me.
didn't know that was
Absolutely.
a thing.
Walk on
All
the
right.
same side as me. That's it. That's not really a 13th
I think that's
thing.
a safety thing,
Well,
honestly. Yeah, you don't
in
wanna,
some cases it can be, but it's also like, if you see like a light pole or something.
Yeah.
Why are you walking on the other side? Walk on the side with me.
I get that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 13 is a special day here at 13
I heard.
News Now. Yeah. So, and actually, the alumni from the station all get together every Friday the 13th, and they get together and share old stories. I'm going to show you a graphic here as we get into the forecast, and let's see how many of these things. In the words of Michael Scott from The Office, I'm not superstitious, but I may be a little stitious. So we'll take a look at this. So you've got your penny. I mean, some folks say if it's not heads up, don't pick it up. My dad always said, is a poor man that won't stoop to pick up a penny. So,
Amen.
You might think, oh, well, now they're collector's items, right? They don't even make them anymore. You got spilled salt. You know what you do with spilled salt, Sarah?
I do.
Yeah, what do you do to avoid
Clean
bad
it
luck?
up.
You throw it over your shoulder.
Throw it over your shoulder.
Is it a specific shoulder?
I don't
though?
think so. I mean, we just throw it over his shoulder. But anyway, all right, so there's that. You've got the raven, and I mean, I guess, I never really thought of the raven as like not, as an unlucky thing, but you've got that black cat just keeps walking back and forth in front of the camera. You got an umbrella open indoors. I try to avoid that. I really do. That's like, not that I'm that worried about it, but it's just, awkward and,
One time I was coming home in college and there was a black cat in front of my doorway, my apartment. I stood the car for at least 15 minutes.
Did you
till the car
really?
cat left. It was like the middle of the night. I was like, this can't be a great omen.
You're like, no.
I
just
sat
no.
there, waited for it to go about its way.
The one thing that I think was an old wives' tale, but like if a bird dies like on your property or in front of your house, that's supposed to be kind of an omen of bad things. So that's like the one thing, like whenever there's like a bird flies into a window pane or dies or something there on your property, I'm like, no. All right. So anyway, we got the ladder. You don't want to walk under that. The upside down horseshoe, you got to have the open end up to hold the luck. Just some fun that we're having on Friday the 13th. Highs today in the low 40s. I think at the airport right around 41 degrees or so. Inland areas will be a little bit warmer. Some spots up on the eastern shore and even down around the Outer Banks, upper 30s. So it is a chilly day. And you see over my shoulder here all that sunshine. You can see a flight there, a plane coming into land at Norfolk International. We have mostly sunny skies. Now, as we get into the forecast across the area today, high pressure is just out to the west. And I'll tell you what, this high pressure is going to be significant. It will keep us sunny today and mainly clear tonight. I was going to show you where this thing is. Right here is where that low is, or that high pressure is located right there. You've got winds spiraling out in a clockwise direction from the high. So those winds move out from the high pressure clockwise. That's why we have a north wind right now. As the high pressure moves overhead and then moves offshore later tonight and into tomorrow, the winds are going to shift to the south and southwest, and that means warmer weather as we just do a extreme close-up on the peninsula. I'm not sure why the computer did that. Anyway, here's the forecast, our futurecast, what you need to see. We're going to see the sunshine, temperatures upper 30s to low 40s. Some inland areas into the mid 40s today. Really a nice Friday, just a chilly Friday. Our normal high is 53. As we head through the overnight, back into the 20s, so a cold start just to Valentine's Day. So if you don't get a card for that special somebody and you need to do it tomorrow morning before they wake up or something, you're going to be facing some cold temps out the door. All right. Not that I know anybody that would do that myself. But if that's your case, try to take care of it when it's warmer. Temperatures tomorrow afternoon in the mid-50s, upper 50s inland, low 50s at the coast. Just a really nice day. Temperatures slightly above average. Then the clouds roll in. We've got that rain. And Eugene, this is what we really need to talk about. As we get into the late morning and early afternoon, showers approaching from the west, we need the rain. We are a little bit over 2.5 inches below average for the year. Yeah, so it's time, and we were dry in 2025. So right now we're in a moderate drought. The rain is going to be with us through the afternoon and evening Sunday. Could be a little heavier at times. It'll pull away. You'll notice how the model tries to throw a few wet snowflakes on the back edge up around West Point, Tappahannock. Temperatures there in the mid-30s. Doesn't look like it's going to amount to much. And for our area, we are talking about just rain showers, temperatures here in the upper 30s. But there is at least a chance for a few wet snowflakes to the north. All right, as we go, once that pulls away Monday, I expect some gradual clearing later Monday. Things look great, and temperatures will be warming up the middle of next week. So let's take a look at the 7-day forecast. Our temperatures today around 41, mid-50s tomorrow, a little warmer inland, slightly cooler right at the beaches. 50 on Sunday with the rain coming in. Will be steady, a little bit heavier at times Sunday, late Sunday night. The one thing, if you guys remember a couple days ago, we were talking about maybe some gusty winds on Monday. The models have kind of backed off on that. So good news. Yeah, we'll take the rain. It might be a little bit breezy, but it doesn't look at this point like it's going to get too bad. Then as we get into Tuesday, and even late Monday, partial clearing. Should be partly cloudy Tuesday. And how about Wednesday up to 60? We'll see low 60s on Thursday. Finally, a stretch of days above average.
Okay, Craig, I have to ask that we have 60s in our forecast. Do you think that that's the break we need that's going to get us up in those 50s, 60s?
So as we look forward,
consistently.
Our normal highs now coming up. Right now it's 53. It'll be 54 within the next day or so, and then 55. So it's going to become more normal.
Okay.
We've made it past the climatological coldest part of the season. I do think the temperatures may step back a little bit over the weekend, the following weekend, or into early next week. Not dramatic cold. The bigger question is, are we done with snow or ice? And what I would say in this case, it seems like Hampton Roads always has at least a threat of snow at some point later in the month of February or into March. So don't drop your guard. Don't put away all your winter clothes just yet. Just know that we've got some warmer days ahead, and we'll enjoy them.
And I want to say last year we had a pretty decent snow in March.
We have
a winter storm in March.
I don't remember specifically that the years kind of run together when you've been doing this for 108 years as I have. But I do know late season snows are a pretty common thing where at least you have some mixing, or we'll take a look. And the other thing to think about, and it's funny, I saw Al Roker do an explainer on this on another network, but no, Al did a good job with his team kind of putting this out there, talking about how some of the climate change is actually sparking some of the colder air outbreaks. You don't think about it because you're thinking, well, no, it's colder here. What happened? Climate change or global warming, all that. No. The greater variability is messing with the polar vortex and some of the winds that typically keep some of that cold air pooled up. So I would say this, While we are going to start coming to the warmer part of the season before too long, and we start trending up with more variability, bigger temperature swings, stronger fronts coming through, we could still get hit with a few, pretty big cold blasts. So we'll see. Hopefully, we're going to start putting this behind us because I think a lot of folks ready to start getting out. Sarah is nodding her head yes.
Oh, yeah. Sarah's nodding her head yes. I am internally saying yes. Our spirits are connected when it comes to that. Listen, snow was great when we saw it. Don't need to see it anymore.
Time to go.
It's time to get on out of here.
Yeah, that's the thing. Here in Hampton Roads, once you start to warm it up, you can take advantage of the beach and the water. You want to get out. So
yeah, I think even the Team Snow people are like, all right.
Yeah, been a good one to see you.
we had enough. Oh, man, Craig, well, thank you so much, man, and we appreciate you. And, going into this weekend, I do hope that you and yours have a phenomenal weekend. I know you got some great things planned, I am sure. And it's good that the forecast is going to be fairly,
Oh, yes.
cooperative.
Saturday's going to be amazing. Take advantage of it if you can. And again, Sunday, just know when you hear that rain on the windowsill that we do need it. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, just, cuddle up the next day,
you
with the raindrops falling down on the window panes, all that kind of stuff. All right, Craig, we appreciate you. Let's go ahead and take a quick break, Sarah. And when we come back, we're going to talk about a major launch that took place this morning. We'll show you as SpaceX Falcon 9 took off this morning from Florida.
Ignition and liftoff. Go Falcon, go Dragon, and Godspeed Crew 12.
And liftoff. Freedom flies bound for the International Space Station. 1.7 million pounds of thrust now propelling Falcon 9 and Crew 12.
And there you are looking at the moments this morning where SpaceX Falcon 9 blasted off from Cape Canaveral in Florida, lifting off as they are headed on their way to the International Space Station. There are 4 people on board, 2 American astronauts, 1 French and 1 Russian. And really, I talked about it on Daybreak this morning, Sarah. Every time we see these, it is spectacular. You never want to take this for granted. We see them more and more often now, and you can even see them now in the private sector. But the fact that we have people going into space is phenomenal. Now, the thing about this particular mission, though, it's very important for the space station because they've been operating at a reduced staff. If you recall, we reported not too long ago that one of the crews had to return earlier than planned because one of the crew members had a serious, but we're told stable health condition. It was the first medical evacuation in the lab's 26-year history. So now you have this team of 4 that's going up there, and they're going to be able to support the others who are working in the International Space Station. There was a press conference that took place not long ago that we want to air for you so you can get more up-to-date information about those who are going on this journey, what they're going to be doing, and then, as I just told you, some of the challenges they may have faced for those who have been at the ISS over the last few weeks with that reduced staff.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today at the Crew 12 post-launch news conference. I am glad to be joined here today by NASA's Administrator, Jared Isaacman, Professor Daniel Neuenschwander, Director of Human and Robotic Exploration from ESA, Steve Stitch, the Manager of CCP, Dana Weigel, the Manager of the ISS program, and Juliana Scheiman, Director of NASA Science and Dragon Programs at SpaceX. Each of our participants will give brief remarks, and then we will open up the floor to those of you here in the room and to those of you calling in via telephone. If you want to get into the queue, please press *1, and out of the queue, *2. So with that, I will hand it over to Administrator Isaacman.
Thanks, Bethany. Good morning, everyone. What a absolutely wonderful start to the day. We saw a remarkable Crew 12 launch, a very impressive F9 return to launch site. I'm sure everybody heard that, all while Artemis 2 sits on the pad in preparation for its historic mission. So following this morning's launch operations, Dragon completed its on-orbit checkouts. Nose cone is open, and the crew are now safely on their way to the International Space Station. Teams throughout the agency, SpaceX, ESA, Roscosmos, and more continue to monitor progress of the mission ahead of its docking. I've said it before, I'll say it again, that this mission has shown in many ways what it means to be mission-focused at NASA. So just to recap, in the last couple of weeks, we brought Crew 11 home early. We pulled forward Crew 12 to the launch date today, all while simultaneously making preparations for the Artemis 2 mission, which its next window will open up in early March. That's only possible because of an incredibly talented workforce that we have here at NASA, alongside our contractors and our commercial and international partners. So along this mission, NASA is sending an astronaut into space again for the first time. So I want to congratulate Jack Hathaway. This is what he's trained for, and I know he possesses the qualities found in many accomplished astronauts. This crew will continue critical scientific research in the orbiting laboratory, but they will be making history in many other ways. For example, I think this is very exciting, we will have the first spaceship to space station call between the International Space Station and a lunar mission with Artemis 2. Just really think about that, right? It's pretty exciting. I can only imagine what it's going to be like in the years ahead, right? You have multiple space stations that are up there, cruise cargo going to and from the lunar environment, people phoning home from a moon base. It's pretty exciting to think about, and we're taking a nice step in that direction in the mission ahead. In addition, this mission maintains our over 25 years of continuous human presence in low Earth orbit. So the crew, along with the subsequent ones to follow, will absolutely make the most of our International Space Station. We are going to get our highest potential science and research up there with the aim of cracking the code and igniting an orbital economy. So someday we do live in a world with lots of commercially operated space stations in line with our President's national space policy. And with that, I will turn it over to Steve Stitch.
Thank you, Administrator Isaacman, and thank you all for being here on a really happy morning. I'm proud to say we didn't talk about weather much at all after talking about weather for a whole week. We're blessed with really good launch site weather this morning and really good weather down the ascent track, which we've been monitoring all week, and we finally found the right day to launch on Friday the 13th. I understand this is the first time NASA's ever launched on Friday the 13th, so pretty amazing times. Really appreciate all the hard work between NASA and SpaceX and on Crew 12. It's great to get the launch behind us. Of course, that's the first step. The crew's doing well on orbit. Jessica, Jack, Sophie, and Andre are settling into their kind of off-duty period. They did a phasing burn a little while ago to set up the rendezvous. We'll be docking on Saturday about 3:15 Eastern. There will be another burn late tonight around just before midnight, another phasing burn. We really didn't have too many things to work during the countdown. It was really quiet with Falcon 9 and Dragon. Nothing really off nominal. As Jared said, the spacecraft got on orbit. We checked out the service section Dracos. The forward bulkhead Dracos are firing just fine. All the systems on Dragon are working well, and so we'll just continue to monitor the progress of the vehicle until we get in. Looking forward to docking. Hopefully our teams will get a little rest today. It's been a busy, long week with the launch. I really want to thank all of our partners, U.S. Space Force, Detachment 3, U.S. Coast Guard, Department of War, the FAA, all the agencies that support us. I want to thank the Space Station Program, SpaceX, and all our international partners. And I'll turn it over to Dana.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you all for being here. I would like to extend my thanks and appreciation to the Commercial Crew Program and the SpaceX team for the tremendous amount of work that they did leading up to today's successful launch. And I'd also like to thank the Space Station team for being flexible and adapting all of the onboard plans in light of the early return of Crew 11. With today's launch, we've got docking tomorrow, as Steve said, 3:15 p.m. Eastern Time. That docking will be to our Node 2 Zenith port. Really looking forward to having the crew on board and having the extra helping hands. This will be the second flight for Jessica and Andre and the first flight for Jack and for Sophie. So really excited to have them on board. Chris is doing great on board along with the two cosmonauts. He's been doing research, cargo packing, and a little bit of tidying up, getting ready for Crew 12's arrival. When Crew 12 gets there, they'll spend a few dedicated days with Chris going through handover. Top of the agenda is going through the emergency response procedures, becoming familiar with the location of the emergency equipment, and then outfitting the Dragon with some of the standard emergency hardware. They'll also do familiarization work with some of the equipment that they would commonly interface with, toilets, exercise equipment, those types of things. They've got some critical research they'll be transferring for us in the first couple of days from freezers that we sent up with the Dragon. And then they've got a little bit of initial human research work that they'll be doing. And that's critical overall just for our long-term plans to fly longer and longer duration missions and making sure that we're taking care of astronauts' health as we look forward to Moon and Mars, longer durations. One unique thing we're doing for this handover, normally we've got 4 crew handing over with 4 crew, and since we've got Chris doing a little zone defense with the entire crew, we supplemented and had some onboard videos put together. So some of those were from previous crews, and then Chris made some. So when Crew 12 gets up there, they'll also do some video review. As you heard in the pre-launch briefing, we've got a busy few months in front of us on board Space Station. At the end of this month, we'll be undocking the SpaceX 33 cargo mission. Beginning of March, we will unberth HTV X1. We've got a very brief docking sensor demonstration we'll do with the vehicle, then we'll release it. In mid-March, we're planning to do an EVA to finish installing a modification kit to one of our solar arrays. This is called the 2A array, and that's in preparation for upgraded iROSA rollout arrays that are coming up later in the summer. We've got a second EVA in April to install the other modification kit on our very last array, the 3B array. Towards the end of March, our Roscosmos colleagues are going to launch a Progress cargo resupply vehicle. And then in April, we've got the Northrop Grumman 24 Cygnus mission. So a lot going on, as always, very, very busy on board Space Station. And we're really looking forward to having the crew on board. With that, I will pass it over to Daniel.
Okay. Thanks, Dana. Let me start by congratulating everybody for this amazing launch. Everything went really flawlessly, so thanks to the teams at ESA, NASA, SpaceX, and all the partners for their incredible work done. My first thought, of course, is going to the crew, and Sophie in particular. This is just the start of a journey. I know that they are very well prepared, and I'm really excited to see the next steps unfold. Sophie will be the first of her astronaut class to embark on a long-duration mission, and she had an incredible journey. I cannot stress enough how well she has been performing in a very short duration of time. Something unanimously underlined by her trainers is her mindset, which is well reflected in the patch of the mission. On top of Crew 12, on Expedition 74 patches, we also have an ESA patch, because we never get enough of those, of course. The name of her mission is something she chose, something she felt aligned. It's called Epsilon, and it reflects the power of small yet impactful contributions and how multiple parts unite to create a whole. A nice message of modesty, underlying that an astronaut is only, in bracket, a part of a wider group, one piece of a complex puzzle. We are really all very proud of her and how she represents ESA, Europe, and France. I also take the opportunity today to reaffirm ESA's commitment to the International Space Station and the peaceful exploration of space. We are here this morning after the launch of 2 Americans, a Russian and a European, as one crew. This is again a testimony of what we can achieve together. The ISS stands as a powerful symbol of humanity. Our meeting this week between NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman and ESA Director General Joseph Aschbacher gave us the opportunity to reaffirm our shared commitment of continuing this remarkable journey. Together, we are already preparing the next chapter, guided by common objectives, increasing the pace of human space flights and creating new opportunities for research and scientific discovery. But low Earth orbit is not our final destination. We also, this night, also SLS on the pad. And I'm confident that through the Artemis program, to which ESA provides key contributions, we are returning to the moon because we want to stay there. And down the road, Mars will follow. Finally, today, from every corner of Europe, we fly with Sophie. And with that, over to Juliana from SpaceX.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take another quick break here. We'll be back in about 2 minutes with more from Live Impact News. Welcome back here. We're going to go back to the press conference that we heard just moments ago from NASA on the launch of the latest a group of astronauts headed to the International Space Station. Remember, that just took place this morning out of Cape Canaveral in Florida. They are heading up there to make sure that they can have more people, extra people there, as the ISS has been operating under a reduced staff over the last few weeks. So let's head back to those remarks.
Here today to celebrate the launch of the Crew 12 mission. As you've heard, Falcon 9 successfully lifted off and safely delivered the Dragon spacecraft and its crew to the intended orbit. And as you also heard, the Dragon spacecraft will be approaching the ISS tomorrow at 3:15 p.m. Eastern. And after the successful docking of the Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station, the SpaceX team's next big milestone, as you heard Dana mention, is the CRS-33 Dragon return, which we're targeting at the end of this month. So it's also a busy time for SpaceX too. I have a few fun statistics. This launch, the Crew 12 mission, is the 20th human spaceflight mission that SpaceX has launched. Also, when the Dragon capsule docks with the International Space Station, it will be the 51st time a Dragon spacecraft has docked with ISS, or has visited ISS, I should say. Also, the Dragon spacecraft Freedom, this is its 5th flight. It previously launched Crew 4, AX2, AX3, and most recently Crew 9, and now Crew 12. Also, as you heard the administrator mention, this is also a first for SpaceX, where the booster returned to its launch site, its actual launch site, LC-40, and which is, I always like to think that the booster feels like it's returning home when it returns exactly to the launch site. So that's a fun one. And that's something we'll be doing going forward. LC-40 is where our landing zone is. And yeah, on behalf of everybody at SpaceX, we are incredibly proud to support human spaceflight missions and all of the amazing science and research that happens on the International Space Station. So on behalf of everyone at SpaceX, we want to give a big thank you to our partners for their trust in us, and thank you for flying SpaceX. And back to you, Bethany.
Great. With that, we will open the floor to questions. I see we have so many people here in the room. And I also just want to remind the people who are dialing in that you can dial *1 to get into the queue and *2 to get out of the queue. We have a microphone here in the room, so if we want to go right over here.
Hi, JoshDinnerspace.com. Thanks for doing this. Were there any lessons learned from Crew 11 that have informed maybe future pre-launch readiness procedures? Crew 12 got to launch a little bit early. Is there anything in the future, should you need to bring another crew home early, that the next crew on deck will be ready to take over in a different or a quicker way?
Yeah, I mean, the vehicle, we were able to, we were processing Dragon a little bit ahead of schedule the whole time, and so we looked at the readiness of Dragon, and we're able to accelerate it a little bit. We probably could have moved the launch up a little bit more with Dragon and Falcon 9. At the end, when you look at the totality of a mission, it's getting the vehicles, the hardware, and the software ready, and also the crew. And so in this case, crew training was what drove the date that we selected. So we're looking at all those things. We were working already ahead for Crew 13 and trying to have Dragon ready a little bit early again. We have that luxury right now with our manifest. And I'll see if Dana has anything to add.
Yeah, I would just add that, we've got 7 people total on board Space Station. And the way we're flying today, we have a cosmonaut who flies with us. Of course, Andre launched with us today. And then we've always got a USOS crew member, a NASA crew member who's on the Soyuz. And so, though it's more challenging with only one set of hands, we do have other folks on board who can help us if we really need extra sets of hands. So the way I look at it, though it's not ideal if you have to bring a crew home early, there's no immediate crisis or emergency. We can manage that. We've flown before with 3 crew on board. So we're fortunate that we have flexibility in our training, our operations, and the spacecraft to make some adjustments. But I don't see us doing anything specifically different in the future per se to, like, let's say, have a vehicle on standby or a crew ready. We're pretty flexible and adaptable, and we'll work towards whatever the situation demands.
And with that, we'll head over here.
Thank you so much for this press conference. Lenka White from RIA Novosti. If I may, please, to Mr. Jarrett. as the new administrator, how is your cooperation with Roscosmos going, and what are the plans for the future? And if I may also, how important is it to incorporate AI into long-distance missions? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I guess to start on the AI point, work backwards from there, it's incredibly important right now. Recently, we did a demonstration with our Perseverance rover on Mars, where it was undertaking AI operations like autonomous driving and detection, which is going to be just essential for both robotic and crewed missions in the future. I mean, one, just natural transmission delays, is going to challenge, I think, the historic mission control construct there. But our sensors, especially on these robotic missions, are going to gather so much data now that you're going to want to be able to analyze it, interpret it, and make decisions while you're on mission versus waiting for it to necessarily come back, and also determining what data is necessarily important to send back first, which can be discarded. So I think that you're going to continue to see that. In fact, one of the missions to robotic mission to Venus that we're looking at now may be designed right from the get-go to have AI incorporated into its mission software. In terms of a relationship, with Roscosmos, I think that the Crew 11 situation highlights it at its best, right? I mean, that's a situation where we could bring our astronauts home early, knowing that the relationship as it's constructed with our partners in Russia enable continuous operations of the space station in a relatively safe way. So I think that the design of the International Space Station really had a chance, through its international partners, had a chance to really showcase itself over the last month or so. Yeah.
We'll head over to Will right here.
Hi, excuse me, Will Robinson Smith with Spaceflight Now. Thank you for taking the time. To the administrator, during your remarks with Steve Sisloff, you mentioned earlier today, well, I guess yesterday, that there were a series of mini wet dress rehearsals for the SLS rocket. I wonder if you can go into a little more detail on this particular stage of the testing and if that was able to inform a date for the full next wet dress rehearsal. Thanks.
Sure. So I think we're going to provide additional details on that tomorrow. The teams wanted to have a chance to get together and review the data before taking a position on whether or not we are going to advance to a full wet dress 2 or undertake additional kind of mini tests. This should make a lot of sense, right? On Artemis 1, we were combating hydrogen leaks multiple times on that. We obviously encountered that again on the Artemis 2 wet dress rehearsal. We already communicated
a lot of interesting information into that. I also thought, Sarah, was fascinating to hear. Again, we had someone on the show a few days ago talking about artificial intelligence and how AI is fitting into things, and to hear the answer and how it is also working in with these launches and these projects as well. We do need to take another quick break, and on the other side of this, we'll have much more here for Live Impact News. Thanks for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. You know, today is a big deadline in our federal government as leaders are supposed to come to an agreement when it comes to funding the Department of Homeland Security or risk a partial government shutdown that would certainly impact several different agencies. That would not only likely impact portions of DHS, obviously, but also the TSA being among them, FEMA also being among that, the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, to say just a few. This has been an ongoing conversation now, even when we go back to the previous conversations about government funding, with Democrats not wanting to give a blank check on increasing the funding for DHS, particularly with what has been going on in various states across our country, like Minnesota, Minneapolis. And as the Trump administration's immigration policies have really kind of become a site of conflict amongst the two parties and then a lot of people here within the country. So that is a big thing looming today. That deadline is later on this day by the end of today on this Friday, and we'll see what happens. We haven't seen a lot of activity, Sarah, when it comes to the our leaders in Washington. So almost certainly it appears that deadline is not going to be met. We were able to catch up with Senator Mark Warner here of Virginia, and he spoke on a number of different things, including that topic. We're going to air that for you as he spoke with reporters just hours ago, and we'll hear from him on what he thinks about that and another big issue he says is really catching his attention.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the regular update from Washington. As usual, this has been a busy week. I'd like to start with something that I've spent a lot of time on, which is the, I believe, baseless effort to try to once again relitigate the 2020 election. You may recall this was a case where a few weeks back, a search warrant was issued to look at the election results from Atlanta, Fulton County. And one of the mysterious things that happened was, why in the heck was the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, on the scene when she has nothing to do with domestic election security? There was a set of confusing answers that came after that. One saying she said the president asked her to be there, which begs the question of why would the president even know about a search warrant being issued? I mean, these were the kind of abuses that were corrected with the reforms after Watergate. And then Ms. Gabbard suddenly say, well, there must have been some foreign nexus. Well, earlier this week, the affidavit that was issued was revealed. And I wasn't surprised, but this was all based upon debunked conspiracy theories by a gentleman named Mr. Odin, Ken Odin. And by the way, this guy has been sanctioned because of his illicit and inappropriate behavior after the 2020 election. And this guy is still somehow in the intelligence community rambling around, trying to dig up dirt on 2020 because Donald Trump just can't get over the fact that he lost. So it again begs the question, what was Tulsi Gabbard doing there? This was not her job. Matter of fact, she's actively done things to unravel election security in terms of foreign influence, which would be her job. But there was something called the Foreign Malign Influence Center that she's disbanded. She worked with the equally inept Kash Patel to shut down some of the FBI activities about foreign interference. And we've seen the more overall administration-wide efforts to undermine and cut about a third of the funding for the cybersecurity agency that works with local elections officials to make sure they're hardened against cyber attacks. So why was she there? I believe she's obviously not involved in anything with foreign policy. She's not been involved in any of the briefings on Venezuela, on Iran, on China, on NATO. It appears to be a pathetic effort to try to get back in the good graces of her boss. It's dangerous. It's inappropriate, it's unprofessional, and along with Senator Padilla, who is the ranking member on the Rules Committee, we've asked her to come testify before Congress. What is she doing? Why is she doing it? And why isn't she doing the job that she was I believe, still unfortunately confirmed to. On top of that, we have continued comments about the president nationalizing elections, which is totally against the Constitution. We see the president and his Department of Justice try to bring charges against two members of the Senate, Senator Kelly and Senator Slotkin from Michigan, and 4 House members, literally for exercising the First Amendment rights. And the fact that the grand jury, which virtually never happened, said there's no violation here and turned down the indictment is an indication that, thank goodness, there is still part of our constitutional system is holding. And we also have the ongoing debate about the role of ICE, and I know I've raised constant concerns about the idea of ICE roving patrols showing up at polling stations. I know people have said to me, well, Senator, if you're an American citizen and legally able to vote, why should you be worried if ICE is there? Well, let me give you a couple examples. One, we have definitely seen in Minnesota and in Virginia, ICE, I believe, discriminate against particularly folks of Latino heritage, whether they're citizens or not. We have a number of families that are mixed status, some legal, some not legal, who will be scared away from voting. And then we've also got, if you're saying, well, that still doesn't apply to me, ICE is collecting personal information on American citizens using some of the major tech companies. Do you really trust ICE to have that information about you? And for them having that information, it doesn't take much to dissuade Americans from voting to start with, but it can have an enormously chilling effect. And I am increasingly concerned about the integrity of our elections in 26. I'm concerned it appears that we're going to have a statewide referendum on redistricting on April 21st. I'm concerned that they may try out some of their tactics in Virginia before this fall's elections. And I have more to say about this, but it is of enormous concern. I wanted to raise the issue. I'm sorry about one item here. I got to just refresh my memory. I'm going to end on 2 things that actually were good news, and I don't get a lot of good news on in this job these days. One was yesterday. 6 House Republicans joined with all the Democrats to say, no to Trump's tariffs on Canada. Canada, our biggest trading partner, I believe it is still Virginia's biggest trading partner. It and China go back and forth. These tariffs are a tax on Virginians. And the fact that there's now been both the Senate and the House, and I want to compliment my friend Tim Kaine, who's been leading this effort in the Senate, to say, no, we're not going to put this tax in place illegally, because this is before the Supreme Court. And at the end of the day, not just Canada, but Mexico, but the tariffs that he's raised all across the world, we've gone from an average tariff rate of about 2.3% to over 18%. That is a tax. And whether it shows up in prices now or whether it shows up in the cost of manufacturing, Americans are paying it. And that's one of the reasons why Americans are so uniformly rejecting this president, because he's not brought prices down. He's not focused on, obviously, on decreasing health care costs, where he's taking health care away. He's so obsessed about whether relitigating 2020 or sticking America his nose into international affairs everywhere. This was going to be the guy that was going to end foreign wars. And instead, he has deployed American troops in 6 different countries. And in the meantime is managing to offend all our allies. So it was good news coming out of the House yesterday that now the House and the Senate in bipartisan way has said no to these Trump tariff taxes. And then finally, one, again, small ball, but I've had bipartisan legislation for a while with Senator Kennedy from Louisiana that finally signed into law that basically says, how do we stop the IRS from making payments to dead people? Now, you'd think that shouldn't be that hard, but we've had to pass a law that basically says on the do not pay list and the list of data about who have died, they are coming together. It is now part of the law, And, while it was not a huge number, any of these stories where somebody who's dead gets paid by the federal government just, lends credibility to the notion that everything in the government is inept. So at least this loophole has now been closed, and for those deceased recently or otherwise, don't expect any more federal dollars. So with that, let me turn it over to Catherine. I'm happy to take your questions.
Our first question is from Mitchell with WTOP.
Hi, Senator. Thanks a lot for joining us. By the way, I enjoyed your reference to small ball, since we still have all this snowcrete on the ground. Baseball season just a few months away. But at any rate, more pressing, obviously, the issue related to DHS. What are your concerns with Congress likely to head out of town here without this being resolved? Are you worried in any way that this issue is going to languish without any reforms, and that the issue could kind of go back to a back burner at some point?
Well, I'm concerned about that, but I also know that the reforms that we asked for, that I think are overwhelmingly supported by the American people. If you cut through all the details, it's basically saying that ICE should operate on the same principles that our local police force do. That, no mask, identify yourself, get a warrant if you're going to search somebody's house. These are basic policing responsibilities that ICE has kind of abused. So I think the American public's for these reforms. I would point out, and this is one of the issues that ICE got so overly funded with the big ugly bill last summer that they're not going to cut off their funds. And even with issues like TSA and FEMA, there are funds available on those accounts. And I don't think it will get pushed back. I mean, nobody's going to miss a paycheck for at least the next couple of weeks. But I think it has to be dealt with. And I just feel like there was a lack of seriousness from the White House. I've not reviewed all the documents that came in last night. I'm going to get that update in about 30 minutes. But reasonable people could have sat down and worked this out. And, and now we see the announcement today that they're going to shut down the operations in Minneapolis. I'll believe it when I see it. But if they shut it down in Minneapolis, doesn't mean the same kind of ICE search couldn't happen in Richmond tomorrow, or Norfolk tomorrow, or in Fairfax County. So we got to have a reform system.
Our next question is from Jacob with Scripps News.
Hi, Senator. Thanks, as always, for holding this call. Two questions on two separate topics, if I may. First, we discussed last week this whistleblower complaint that's making its way through ODNI. And as you may have seen, there's been some back and forth between the lawyers representing the whistleblower and the general counsel at ODNI about whether the whistleblower and their attorney should be able to provide Congress directly with the complaint in some sort of classified setting. ODNI seems to say that they're not lawfully able to do so. I just wanted to ask if it's your understanding that the whistleblower is allowed to provide, certain congressional offices or officials with the unredacted complaint. And similarly, if you've been in touch at all with the whistleblower or their team as all of these developments have unfolded. And then secondly, just on a point you mentioned in your opening remarks about the Trump administration trying and failing to secure this indictment against those lawmakers. As you may have seen, former White House counsel Bob Bauer today called for a revamping of the independent counsel statute to try to prevent any presidential administration from weaponizing the Justice Department against sitting lawmakers. Wanted to get your reaction if that's something that you might be supportive of Congress trying to take action on. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take them in reverse order. I've not seen Bob Bauer's proposal, but on the face of it, it seems to make sense. We read about other countries where, a dictator or somebody in power goes after his political or her political opposition and arrests lawmakers. That's never happened in our country. And now the fact that they brought such a bogus indictment against these members of Congress, that in my understanding is, they didn't get a single vote amongst the grand jury. That is a stunning statement on how badly put together this plan was pursuing political enemies. But, as we've seen, I don't know if they're out of legal jeopardy, whether they're going to try to go to another grand jury. We actually heard, we've heard where grand juries wouldn't indict, I believe, Jim Comey at one point, and the case then fell apart. But if you can continue to use and harass your political opponents using the power of the Justice Department, you're still going to run up huge legal bills. It's un-American. Nobody has said what these members said was not protected by the First Amendment or protected by the speech and debate clause in the Constitution. So it's mind-boggling to me. And again, it's you guys know I've been accused a lot of times of being way too bipartisan, but I have been so disappointed. We've heard a few Republican members speak out, but why there's not universal condemnation, why there's not anybody that says Congress needs to be separate and not subject to the political retribution of a president. This is how a democracy unwinds. So I'm pretty disappointed with my friends for not speaking up on this issue. On the whistleblower complaint, a couple of things. I won't go through all of the details because it gets pretty complicated. But let's start with the basic fact. Whistleblower. Well, let me also say on whether the whistleblower. I have not talked to the whistleblower or their attorney. We always leave that again. Throughout my tenure on the Intelligence Committee, they make the initial approach to our staff. The staff does the first review, and I'm not actually sure whether the whistleblower's lawyer has reached out. I think they've expressed interest, but I'm not sure. But let's go through what we do know. This whistleblower brought a complaint in May. The Director of National Intelligence, based upon testimony of her then General Counsel, her now Assistant General Counsel, briefed the DNI in June, outlining some of her legal obligations. We, the Congress, didn't get even indication there was a complaint until November. And there is usually the obligation that you're supposed to report within 21 days. It took from November till February till we got the complaint. And this was, again, a bipartisan request from the whole Gang of Eight. I obviously can't comment on the substance of the complaint, but frankly, I can't even make a judgment on the substance of the complaint because it was so redacted. So we have asked for some of the underlying intelligence. We've asked to try to get it redacted, at least at the Gang of Eight level. And in terms of the lawyers' willingness to try to bring the complaint to the committees, this is a little bit of what the director is hanging her hat on, but it doesn't pass the smell test. You've got this obligation to report, but then there's a bit of ambiguity about the legal guidance the ODNI is supposed to give to the whistleblower's attorney about how they present that information. So you've got to get legal guidance on how to come forward. And it appears they've just been dragging their feet on that and punting it. So she says, well, she had no obligation. Well, I don't think any reasonable person would have thought that if the whistleblower brought the complaint in May, that now in February, months and months later, you wouldn't have gotten basic legal guidance on how you present it in a way that's appropriate. So, I feel this is a dereliction of duty from the ODNI. I feel this was an effort to, not just keep this from me, but it's an effort to keep it from the whole Gang of Eight, Democrat and Republican alike. And it's, there's going to be more to come because we're going to get, access to the underlying intelligence, and we have to get some level of redaction at least, and that's why the Gang of Eight was set up, because we have a record of keeping everything secret. And, in many ways, it's made the situation worse by, what appears to be almost the cover-up, maybe worse than the crime in terms of the complaint itself. But I can't make a judgment on that because I don't know.
Our next question is from Charlie with ABC 13. Hi, Senator. I wanted to ask about the SAVE Act that passed the House recently and is now in the Senate. So my question is, you now have to show a real ID to board a plane. Do you think similar identification requirements should apply to voting?
Well, I don't accept the premise of your question because we actually have, you got to show ID to vote in Virginia right now. You can't walk in and vote and say, I'm, Mark Warner or Joe Jones. You got to show an official ID like a driver's license, or if you don't have a driver's license, you have to bring other documents showing where you live, and then you put in a provisional category. This SAVE Act, and by the way, our IDs have become more and more, driver's licenses, you have the kind of real ID component, but this SAVE Act, which I strongly oppose, would require, you got to show your birth certificate. You got to show a passport. Most Americans, I think it's only about 50-50 now in terms of the number of Americans that have a passport. And you talk about how this would disenfranchise folks. Folks in rural communities have a much lower percentage of passports. You're going to say to folks in South Side and Southwest, you don't get to vote because you never got a passport or you don't have your birth certificate? And you as what also ought to be, I think, just insulting is, you got to bring your birth certificate. God forbid you've got married and changed your name. This is outright discrimination against women who choose to change their name when they get married. So this is not a valid effort. I strongly oppose it. And as documents after documents, investigation after investigation shows, the number of non-citizens trying to vote is so minuscule. And I think after, I can't remember, was it 24 or 20, it was like nationwide, millions and tens of millions of things were looked at. And there were like in the tens, not in the hundreds, but I believe in the tens, the number of people who actually were non-citizens that voted. Let's actually, I honestly think we ought to get more Americans registered to vote. I think we'd have a stronger democracy if more people voted. And I still am, I guess I'm old school. I still remember when things like motor voter, making it easier to register when you get your driver's license or government offices, was broadly bipartisan. And I sure as heck hope we could get back to that.
Our next question is from Regina with Wavy.
Good afternoon, Senator. Thank you so much for taking my call. I have a couple of questions involving the media, but the military in Hampton Roads. Number one, we learned today that border officers fired an anti-drone laser on what turned out to be a balloon without consulting the FAA. Imagine if that had happened in the Oceana area. Number two, a sailor, a Marine from the USS Iwo Jima fell overboard, missing at sea. The Norfolk-based Truxtun and the USNS Supply collided yesterday during an UNREP, known as an underway rep, when they're transferring supplies back and forth. I have said before to other members of Congress, it appears the Navy, which has lost several aircraft recently, has forgotten how to be the Navy. Comment on that, and also the border situation in El Paso.
Yeah, thank you for both questions. Anytime we lose a sailor, it's a great tragedy. And I pray that he's recovered, but obviously we may have lost another American patriot. And you're right, we've seen planes fall off aircraft carriers, we've seen now this description of these ships colliding, my understanding, and I just got a quick report on this, so I need to get all my facts straight, but my understanding is that it was off the coast of Venezuela. We got close to 20% of our fleet off the coast of Venezuela. A lot of those ships home ported in Norfolk. How long are they going to be there? It takes that many to kind of, remember the bad guys are still in charge in Venezuela. It takes that many to try to quarantine and blockade Venezuelan oil from getting out. Are they going to be on a long-term deployment? Many of them have been down there literally for months already. And as great as our Navy is, it still gets stretched. I mean, we think back a couple of weeks ago when the Iranian people went to the street trying to throw off that repressive regime. And the president didn't have all of the assets that if he wanted to take a strike against Iran, he couldn't because the aircraft carrier that was normally there was off the coast of Venezuela. Now we've taken an aircraft carrier from the Indo-Pacific and moved it into the region. The president talking about a second one. But this kind of lack of a theory of the case and how we're not going to overstretch the Navy is a huge concern. And I also go back to, on the Iranian situation, all these things are interconnected. One of the reasons why we couldn't bring more pressure at that moment when the people on Iran were out in the streets and literally thousands of them were killed by this repressive regime, we couldn't get our European allies to help us because they were focused on Trump's effort to break up NATO and potentially threaten Greenland. So these kind of activities, I think, make America less safe, stretches the resources of the world's best Navy, our Navy. And I fear when you're on these long deployments, and as I got to get more details on this, but if they were moving things from one ship to another, I'm not going to comment on full causation, but when you got people deployed this long, it takes a toll. It takes a toll not only on the ships, but it takes a toll on the brave men and women who are sailors. So I want to get more information. On the other, oh my gosh. This is the Keystone Cops. We are developing, and this is now in the public domain, laser weapons that could shoot down drones. And, it is a tool of modern warfare. We need to have that. We see the enormous power of drones being used in Ukraine. But what happened was, I believe the weapon was lent to the Customs and Border Patrol. They wanted to test it out. But funny thing happened on the process of testing. They didn't tell the FAA. So they're doing this because they didn't communicate, or they're having a bureaucratic effort. And not only did they shut down air traffic, traditional air traffic, they were shutting down, emergency. They were, somebody's got to hurt and you've got to fly an emergency helicopter. It was shut down. So this is incompetence. And as you said, my God, if this was happening Hampton Roads, the amount of air traffic we have, not just commercial, but obviously military, if some part of our government is using and testing a weapon without telling the folks who are supposed to be in charge of air traffic control safety, that is a recipe for disaster. And thank God, in the circumstance in El Paso, that all they shot down was a balloon. And my understanding, I've heard reports that it was not even a weather balloon, but it was a party balloon. So, instead of this administration trying to pursue political retribution against the president's political enemies, maybe trying to have a little more focus on the operations of our government and making sure that one branch of government is talking to another would make Americans a heck of a lot safer, and maybe focusing on bringing down costs, which he promised and has done virtually nothing on, instead, in effect, raising costs with these crazy tariffs, might be a way to now take the president out of these record low approval ratings.
Our final question is from Angela with Hampton Roads Messenger.
Good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for taking my question. My question is regarding the joint resolution terminating the national emergency declared to impose duties on articles imported from Canada. Do you know if there are any efforts in Congress to repeal tariffs on any other countries in addition to Canada?
Yes, ma'am. And I appreciate you being on the call. We've now said, Congress has said bipartisan, we don't want the tariffs on Canada because it's a tax on Americans. And it also, Canada is one of our strongest allies. We've now turned Canada almost into an adversary because of this president's actions. Senator Kaine has also brought tariff proposals against the tariffs on Mexico, on Brazil. I know there's going to be a number of these other actions in the House. I think they're teed up. There's got to be a period of waiting, but I think we're going to see a lot of votes in the House take place. You know, we've seen tariffs, for example. Let me give you two other examples. One on India. We spent years trying to make India a closer ally. And India ended up with, at one point, they've been reduced supposedly, although we've got no documentation, up to 50% on Indian tariffs, because he was simply mad that the prime minister there, Modi, didn't say he deserved the Nobel Peace Prize. Pathetic. We've got, tariffs. We had raised tariffs on Australia. We are building submarines with Australia that helps everybody in Hampton Roads. We've got a trade surplus with Australia. It's one of our strongest allies, yet we still whacked them with a tariff. No economist of the right mind would say this kind of, tariff policy with no reason. You want to bring more tariffs against China that cheats on so many things, steals intellectual property? Let's talk about that. But instead, we're tariffing disproportionately our friends, and in many cases, driving them to do more trade with China than with us. And I'm glad to see, at least on the case of Mexico, that you've got bipartisan support to stop that.
So a lot of questions and answers there from Senator Mark Warner. Obviously, you can hear there he is concerned about elections with the latest of the SAVE Act. He also has his concerns when it comes to Tulsi Gabbard being on the site of that raid in Georgia earlier this month as well. And also he talked about, again, the deadline that looms today, at the end of today, when it comes to funding DHS, and that meaning a partial shutdown. Again, the lawmakers, they're out. They're out for this weekend. Remember, Monday is going to be President's Day as well, so this holiday weekend will extend. And so they'll have to figure out some kind of a solution later. Again, but it is partial, so we're not looking at the same level of a situation that we saw months ago when we hit that historic shutdown, but still something that they would want to figure out at some point rather quickly. Let's take a look here at the demands that Democrats were putting in. They were saying they wanted to end roving patrols. They wanted to ban masks. They want to require body cameras. Remember, we do know, at least out of a recent press conference out there in Minnesota, that they will have the ICE agents. They were going to have them moving forward to have some form of body camera, et cetera, getting them on them. But we also know now that that operation is ending, and they're winding down the number of people who have been there, which has been in the thousands in that state, and particularly in the Twin Cities. The Democrats also wanted to hold agents to the same use of force standards as state and local police, that being a big conversation, as we've seen some of these interactions that have led to deaths. And, ODU graduate Renee Good, and then obviously at Alex Preddy, there was another man who was shot as well. And there has been reporting, by the way, in that third case that I just mentioned, that federal officials today dropped the charges against the two men that they say were with that man who was shot. Remember, we told you about that weeks ago, that there was a man who was shot by an ICE agent after the agent said that there were two men who also joined in that and attacked the agent with, I believe, a broom or something of that nature at that time. We've seen reporting this morning that the charges against those individuals have now been dropped at this moment, waiting for more to come out of that. So anyway, all of that flowing into some of the demands the Democrats have. Now, whether or not the two sides will be able to reach an agreement, unclear. So we'll see what happens when it comes to the funding. But remember, the partial shutdown will impact more than DHS, likely still with ICE immigration being what is likely to be an essential thing. They won't be as infected, but for TSA agents and others, they will be. All right, we got to take a quick break here. Give us a few minutes. We appreciate you for sticking with us here on Live Impact News. We'll be right back. All right, thanks for sticking with us here. Again, you just heard from Virginia Senator Mark Warner there speaking ahead of the day's deadline for the funding of DHS. We listed out with the Democrats who are really kind of pushing at this point to try to figure out something when it comes to immigration enforcement with ICE. These are a list of their demands. We did hear from House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also. He spoke with reporters. We're going to play a little bit about that at the moment. Again, all of this as that deadline looms tonight.
Enforcement. ICE is completely and totally out of control. We know they need to be reined in now without further delay. Taxpayer dollars should be used to make life more affordable for the American people, not brutalize or kill them, which is what took place in Minneapolis, and it's what is taking place all across America whenever these masked and untrained ICE agents show up on the scene. House Democrats continue to be committed to making life more affordable for Americans, for driving down the high cost of living. We're committed to fixing our broken healthcare system. And of course, we need to get ICE under control and deliver a country that is consistent with our values, with who we are. That's not what we're seeing right now under Donald Trump and Republicans, who've gone way too far, and the American people know it, which is why Republicans continue to lose elections all across America. Questions?
Good morning. Game this out for me. If they do get an agreement in the Senate and something comes back over here, do you expect, again, Republicans to carry most of the freight and you get a handful of moderate Democrats who might vote for something? Is that the type of deal? Or do you say, okay, we're going to have something that, yes, we Democrats in the House can support this because these are bona fide reforms to ICE?
Funding for ICE and the Department of Homeland Security should not move forward in the absence of dramatic changes that are bold, meaningful, and transformational. Period. Full stop. That's the House Democratic Caucus position, and that's the Senate Democratic Caucus position. And absent dramatic changes being built into the law, it's my expectation that any legislation that falls short of that will fail today in the United States Senate.
Just to piggyback on that, Mr. Leader, I know earlier this week you told me you felt that the White House had walked away from some of Democrats' core asks or proposals. So have you seen the latest offer that they put on the table last night? And if so, has your posture changed at all?
I'm in the process of reviewing the most recent so-called offer from the White House. We'll take a look at it. But my preliminary assessment of it is that it falls short of the type of dramatic changes necessary in order to change ICE's out-of-control behavior and deliver immigration enforcement that actually focuses on violent felons who are here illegally, which is what the president promised to do, and he lied, because taxpayer dollars are being used to brutalize and kill American citizens or violently target law-abiding immigrant families, and that's unacceptable. In our view, for instance, We need to make sure that if ICE agents or DHS agents violate the law or are engaging in violent behavior that brings harm to everyday Americans, they are held accountable independently through state and local investigations and, if merited, criminal prosecutions. There's no indication that the White House is prepared to walk away from its outrageous position that federal agents who violate the law under the banner of ICE are able to benefit from so-called absolute immunity. That's not America, where no one is above the law. And that administration position is incentivizing ICE agents to violently brutalize people in American communities with impunity, because the administration has told them they don't have to worry about ever being held accountable. That's just one of the types of common sense changes necessary in order to do what the American people want us to do, which is get ICE under control. It's a rogue agency right now, using taxpayer dollars to do harm to the American people. That's unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. New Jersey Democrat Annalila Mejia, who just won her special election primary, has not committed to supporting you as party leader. As you look to retake the House later this fall, are you worried about the growing number of candidates who are withholding their support from you?
No.
Reporting indicates that there's 20 candidates who are no's and 57
What was
who are-
unclear about that answer that I just gave you? First of all, I had a very good conversation with her 2 days ago. I've stood for this position as leader and or the next Democratic speaker, I think it's 19 or 20 times. Since you're following this closely, how many times has a Democrat on the floor of the House of Representatives voted against my candidacy?
I don't know, sir. We have quite many
Your-
who are
your-
going
your-
to be elected.
So your
potentially later
silence
this year.
says it all. Unanimous support every single time. Next question.
Well,
Paul?
to follow up on that, though, are you at all concerned that there will be some candidates who come through primaries in races that are battleground targets? California 48, Nebraska 2, Colorado 8. There are some really competitive primaries with a very diverse field ideologically. You know, do you worry about losing seats the way Republicans have done so in the past?
Well, the DCCC doesn't get involved in primaries. We'll monitor all of these races closely. The battlefield was just expanded in terms of the seats that are in play from 39 to 44. Now, let's remember, we're only 3 seats short of taking back control of the House of Representatives. That is a historically close margin, because despite what Mike Johnson, Donald Trump, Republicans, and their propaganda machine had been saying in the aftermath of the November 2024 election, there was no massive mandate. It was a close election with respect to the House. And unlike 2018, where we needed to win 24 seats, and by the way, we won 40 in a similar electoral environment to the one that exists right now, we only need to net 3. It's happening. Democrats are going to take back control of the House. And the only question is, what's the margin? And we understand that. Now, Mike Johnson and Republicans tried to spin everybody after they were crushed all of last year, including in the November off-year elections. And some people fell for it and said, well, Mike Johnson is claiming the Democrats are only winning in blue or maybe purplish states. Of course, that was not accurate. Yes, we decisively won in New Jersey by 14 or 15 points. Yes, we won in Virginia, where there was a Republican governor at the time. But we also won 3 state Supreme Court seats in Pennsylvania, a state that Donald Trump had just won. We won a state Supreme Court election in Wisconsin, a state that Donald Trump had just won. We won statewide races in Georgia for the first time in 20 years, a state that Donald Trump had just won. We ended the Republican supermajority in Mississippi, a state that Donald Trump and Republicans decisively win year after year after year. But as if that wasn't enough, we've now seen in 3 consecutive months, in 3 consecutive red states, Democrats not just win, but decisively win. That was the case in December in South Florida, where we won the Miami mayorship for the first time in nearly 30 years. And the Democratic candidate won by 20 points in deep red Florida. And then in January, we won a special election in deep red Texas, in a district that Donald Trump had just won by 17 points. The Democrat wins by 14. I talked to him yesterday again. And we overperformed by 31 in a state Senate district that's larger than congressional districts. And then, of course, in February, 3 consecutive months, 3 consecutive red states, 3 consecutive results where Democrats decisively won. In the Louisiana House district that Donald Trump had just won by 13 points, we win by 24. That's a 37-point overperformance in deep red Louisiana. Mike Johnson and Steve Scalise's home state. They're shaking in their boots right now. So yes, we're going to continue to monitor the 44 seats that are in play. We've got to only net 3. That's happening. And the likelihood is we're going to win much more than that.
We were just out on the House steps, and Congresswoman Jayapal was decrying the Department of Justice for spying on her search history when she looked at the unredacted files earlier this week. I wondered if you have any concerns about separation of powers there, if you think this is something that should be expected. You go onto their turf, you're in their skiff.
All right, you were just listening to House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries as they have their list of demands that they're trying to reach in terms of coming up with a funding agreement for DHS. But right now, it looks as if that partial government shutdown is going to happen as we are going into an extended holiday weekend for our lawmakers. Also important to note that yesterday the Senate failed to reach an agreement as well. A deal that was put on the table did not pass. It did not get the 60 votes. Again, it does appear as though that partial government shutdown is going to take place. But we need to switch from what's happening in Washington, D.C. to breaking news now in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Virginia Supreme Court has essentially made the way for that April 21st referendum on new congressional maps to go forward. This decision just coming down earlier today, the Supreme Court saying that it will take up that case after a lower court in a separate portion of Virginia ruled that the maps were illegal. The way in which that the Democratic Party had put them forward was illegal. Well, now the Supreme Court says it will take up this case, but not until after the April 21st referendum is supposed to take place. So what does that mean for us at this point? Well, Democrats are claiming this as a win right now. Essentially, Virginians will have the opportunity to vote on these new congressional maps that potentially could give Democrats at least 4 extra seats in the U.S. House here for the state. And the Supreme Court then could potentially rule after voters make their decision. It's unclear, at least to me at this point, how that would go and what it would look like, but that is what we are currently seeing as the possibility here within the Commonwealth. We're already getting some reactions, including from House Speaker Don Scott here in Virginia, who says today the Supreme Court of Virginia affirmed what we already know. Virginians will have the final say. The redistricting referendum on April 21st will move forward. And we're hearing from Republican former delegate Tim Anderson, who's right here in our area of Virginia Beach, talking about what just transpired and said, in short, Virginians will vote first, the Supreme Court will rule later, or a bunch of fancy legal words for saying this sucks. We also are getting a response from a group called Virginians for Fair Elections. This is a PAC that is pumping a lot of money into the changing of these particular maps. They just put in $5 million to support that effort and getting this information out there in support of what Democrats are hoping to do at this point. The spokesperson for Virginians for Fair Elections says today's order is a huge win for Virginia voters. The court made it clear that nothing in this case stops the April 21st referendum from moving forward, and that Virginians will have the final say. This has always been a procedural challenge aimed at stopping voters from even having a say. The referendum proceeds, and the people of Virginia remain in charge of their own elections. So that is certainly big news. We need to continue to dig into a few of these things to figure out now what the timeline becomes, and trying to figure out how early voters will even begin to what's the timeline for the early voters to do so, since the date for that referendum, again, April 21st. But again, big news there coming out of the Commonwealth of Virginia. All right, more breaking news happening right now. We're going to switch gears. This also in Virginia, but in Fairfax County. We told you about the case of the former IRS agent and his au pair, accused of having an affair, which then led to convictions of both in connection to the death of that IRS's agent's wife and another man. Brendan Banfield was convicted just recently in those murders, and here their live-in au pair had already pleaded guilty to a separate charge, and today she is going to be learning her fate. That is her at the moment right there. So her sentencing just went underway. She just sat down. Let's listen in to see what a judge decides in her ruling.
The murder, she's only been charged with the murder of Joseph Ryan. So the only victim impact statements the court can consider are the ones based on which the Commonwealth has charged her with. So I can only take into consideration the victim impact statements from Joseph Ryan's family.
Understood,
Okay,
Your Honor.
so I'll do that and I'll grant your motion. Okay? All right, do you have any other evidence?
Judge, I do, in light of the court's ruling, I'm going to have two witnesses to
Okay.
call. The first of which is going to be Deirdre Fisher.
Okay, Deirdre Fisher.
She is appearing via Teams.
All right, okay. Ma'am, if you could just raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth under penalty of law?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, Ms. Fisher.
Good morning.
Could you please state your name for the court?
My name is Deirdre Maureen Fisher.
And can you tell the court your relationship to Joe Ryan?
Joseph Ryan is my son.
And can you tell the court of any psychological injury that you have received resulting from this offense, or any changes to your personal welfare, lifestyle, or relationships resulting from this offense?
Is this outside of the statement that I
No, ma'am.
am going to read?
You go ahead and read your statement.
Oh, so I read it now?
Yes,
Is
ma'am.
that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Honorable Judge Penny S. Ascaretti, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the impact of the murder of my son, Joseph Nathan Ryan. My baby boy was born 2 days before Christmas, making that our special holiday. His middle name was Nathan, which means gift. Since Joe's murder, I haven't been able to take down my little Christmas tree, which sits behind the urn with his ashes. I say good morning to him each day when I turn on the tree's lights. But of course, that's not Joe sitting there. He can't say, I love you back. When Joe was taken from me cruelly and callously, murdered by Juliana and Brendan on February 24th, 2023, I lost so very much more than I can possibly name. I lost my confidant, someone who knew me deeply, listened without judgment, offered advice with my best interests at heart. I lost my biggest ally and my cheerleader. That empathetic voice saying, "Mom, you got this. Mom, you should be kinder to yourself." I lost my rock and protector. The person who flew down repeatedly to take care of me when I had cancer. I lost the comfort of knowing that my son would be there to care for me when I'm an old woman with illness or dementia, just as he cared for his grandmother and grandfather. I lost my financial sustainability due to grief's torturous effect on my health, both physically and mentally, which has affected my ability to work and function. I lost my peace and sense of well-being. I can never unhear Joe's moans and cries after he was shot, the cries of a dying man. I can never unsee the image of his lifeless, bloody hand from the trial images. I lost nearly all my friends who couldn't handle dealing with someone lost in grief or understand why my life can't just go on. I lost the chance to ever be called grandma. I will never have that. I lost the sound of Joe calling me the most beautiful word in the world, Mom. I lost my Christmas baby, Joseph Nathan, my greatest gift. The impact of Joe's loss doesn't go away. Will never go away, but only grow. So many tears, so many times reaching for the phone to call him, only to remember that he won't and can't pick up. So many times hearing the phone ring and wishing it was him, calling me out of the blue about something happening in the world or in his life. So many empty Christmases and so many birthdays without him singing to me in his awful yet beautiful voice, tone deaf. So many moments of trying to remember the exact sound of his laughter and fearing that someday I won't. So many sleepless nights, so many nightmares of his brutal murder and fear, confusion, and of the pain he must have felt. So many screams and guttural cries into my pillow, feeling the loss of my son. So many moments of reading horrible things online, lies told about who Joe wasn't. So many moments defending and explaining who my son was and why he couldn't have committed the murder of Christine Banfield. God rest her soul. So many conversations with others, draining them and me of a chance to make happier memories together. So many stomach aches. So many doctor's appointments, hospital bills, feelings of shame about my health. So many times wishing I could tell Joe about another milestone in my weight loss journey, seeking better health, knowing how encouraging and proud he would be. So many lost moments, so many moments of loss. My son's life was used and thrown away, seen as worthless and utterly disposable. Disposal by those who plotted and executed his brutal murder. Do I think or dare hope that there will be justice for Joe's death? For my loss as his mother? I don't believe that's possible. What I do hope is that, even for a moment, that the world and you, Judge, will say Joe meant more than nothing, that he was someone worthy of dignity and life, who didn't deserve to be used and thrown away, treated as utterly disposable. Thank you for listening and for weighing the trail of pain and loss Juliana left in the wake of her calculated, cold-blooded murder, with her life and future as her only concern. My son, Joseph Nathan Ryan, was not and is not disposable. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell may have.
All right, cross-examination? No cross-examination. Okay, thank you, Ms. Fisher.
Thank you.
All right, your next witness?
Judge, the next witness that I have is going to be Ms. Sangeeta Ryan, who is present in court.
Okay, Ms. Ryan?
Do you swear or affirm to testify truthfully in this case under penalty of law? Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can you please state your name for the court?
Sangeeta Ryan.
And can you describe your relationship to Joe Ryan?
Is this where I read my statement? Who I met, Joey Nathan Ryan, was my nephew. And Honorable Judge Ascarati, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you for allowing the Ryan family to speak up for our Joey Nathan Ryan. We thank the jury for helping us achieve justice for Joe and Christine. And we thank the Fairfax County Police Department, the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, and all that helped, and we are grateful for justice. So our family has remained silent since the devastating loss out of grief, but also out of respect for the justice system. For us, Joe did not just die on February 23rd, 23. He was murdered over and over again, every time lies were spoken, every time his picture was posted alongside salacious stories told by two wolves in sheep's clothing who perpetrated this crime and attempted to destroy the memory of two remarkable people. Julia and her boss/lover intended to snuff out the life of two innocent victims who deserve to live full and meaningful lives of their own. Well, while we acknowledge the defendant for eventually coming forward with the truth, telling the truth doesn't absolve her of responsibility. Honesty is something we're taught at a young age. Telling the truth doesn't erase the harm. It simply allows others to move forward. It doesn't bring Joe back, and it sure doesn't bring Christine back. Hearing the truth has finally allowed us to exhale. It validated to the world what we already knew, that Joe was not the monster he was portrayed to be. Rather, Joe is an elder brother, a brand new uncle, the eldest cousin and confidant to 4. He is my beloved nephew, and a son and grandson to his loving family. Pardon me 1 second. We acknowledge that Juliana was a young woman in a foreign country, in love with her employer in a situation where the power imbalance was not in her favor. But where our compassion ends is with the one other responsibility. Juliana was entrusted with and received payment for the care and protection of a small, innocent child. And Juliana, I feel, failed Valerie repeatedly. She was trusted to protect this young charge, but instead chose to cause irreparable damage. She robbed her of her mother. She stole childhood memories. She chose to partner in the brutal assassination of her mother's character, as well as her beautiful being. The defendant and her boss/boyfriend convinced Valerie that a stranger broke into her home and killed her mother, when in fact the monsters were the very people who cared for her after the loss. Julianne and her boss worked to erase her mother's existence and credibility and place the blame on an innocent man. Our hearts go out to all of Christine and Valerie's family. What an absolutely incredible person she must have been. But may I tell you about Joe? Joe is loved. Joe came to live with the Ryan family. I'm so sorry.
Take your time.
Joe came to live with the Ryan family just days after his birth. His birth parents, Dad, Sean, and Deirdre, who you met, were teenagers, so Joe lived with and was raised by his paternal grandparents, Connie and Jim, for all of his life. As a young child, Joe, who we call Joey, was fun-loving and loved from the beginning. He was inquisitive, curious, smart, charming, and so dang talkative. Joe approached strangers and passerbyers with random and nerdy questions about Transformers and movie characters and the Legend of Zelda video game characters and who would win in a battle between this person, and he respectfully waited the answers, whether you knew them or not. As he grew into adulthood, Joe's hobbies included building or painting anything that used his fine motor skills. He loved martial arts. He had a great love and respect for our environment, animals, especially mistreated, neglected, and ugly dogs. And he rescued many injured and less loved dogs, bringing them across the country in his travels safely home to the home he shared with his grandmother. Joe cared for people, he cared for animals, and Joe didn't hurt people. When Joe's grandfather, Pap, required care due to a debilitating stroke, Joe left his life in Virginia and moved to Florida to serve as the full-time caregiver to his grandfather, the grandfather that supported him from infancy. When Pap developed dementia and had to move into a memory care facility, then Joe moved back to Virginia, where he began to take care of his grandmother, who had begun to experience health problems of her own. Joe took over transportation for medical appointments, hospital procedures, food shopping, and the bond between Connie and her grandson was as close as that of a mother and child. Joe would never have put himself in a dangerous situation that would risk his ability to continue to take care of his beloved grandmother or his old ugly dog, Kitty. I'm sorry, she's not ugly. When Joe didn't come home, Joe's grandmother, Connie, lost the gentleman that she and Pap raised as their 4th son. Joe's sudden murder devastated his grandma, who was 81, and devastated her so much she could no longer live in the family home without Joe, and quietly and quickly sold her home to dodge memories, grief, and reporters to move closer to my husband and me. My husband is Joe's Uncle Jimmy, and I'm his Aunt Gita. In Joe's absence, my husband and I made the decision to leave our careers and to take over his grandma's support and care team. We continue to do that today, and we think about and talk about Joe every single day. Honorable Judge Asgarati, we feel Joe and Christine were targeted by the worst kind of monsters, the kind who live among the victims and wait until they're the most vulnerable. We feel as a woman, a caretaker, and as a daughter, Juliana had opportunity to stop this brutal assassination. We think she could have warned Christine. We think she could have warned Joe that morning. This could have been a very different ending where Juliana saved 2 lives. But that's not. At least she should have done the job for which she was being paid, to protect a child. She did not. So many opportunities to do the right thing, and Juliana over and over chose not to. And while we acknowledge that she found the strength to tell the truth, it doesn't absolve the responsibility. So today we leave here finally standing as Joe's family. This nightmare's ending. It's our hope that Juliana doesn't walk free, but continues to reflect on how she became capable of doing this, so that when she does return to Brazil, she never victimizes another person, never betrays another child in her care, and never again places selfish desire above human life. She doesn't deserve to profit. We hope that can be enforced. The reality is, though, she will be free one day, and our hope is that she carries the weight of the lives destroyed, that Juliana chooses to live as a decent person, and that she is truly remorseful. The sentence that Juliana receives today is not the only one given. We all carry a life sentence of grief, even after hers ends. We ask for peace. We ask to be allowed to move forward. Today we move forward by returning Joe's kindness to the world. We say his name proudly. We invite the world to finally know the man we protected in silence for so long. He is loved. We miss Joe, and our family is devastated by the way he was ripped from our lives. Joe won't complete painting his unfinished Warhammer 3D figurines. He won't compete in any more live-action role-playing battles with silly, hand-created foam weapons, nor his mixed martial arts or video game battles. He'll no longer bore us with lectures about eating organic food over junk food, but it's with our hearts we thank you, Honorable Judge, and the jury that was here, members of the court, the police, the detective, the prosecution team, the victims team, and all the witnesses who supported justice for Joe. Thank you so much for listening.
Please answer any questions that Mr. Campbell might have.
Any cross-examination?
No
questions. All right, no questions. All right, you can
Thank
go
you
back
so
to your
much.
seat. Thank you, Ms. Ryan.
Judge, I don't have any further evidence, but I do want to acknowledge to the court that the family of Christine Banfield is here today. You can see them to your honor's right.
All right, thank you. Thank you,
Along
ma'am.
with Joe's family.
All
Thank you.
right, thank you. All right, Commonwealth's rest for evidence. For the defense residents, I do have for your evidence the memorandum of support of sentencing, which I have reviewed. In addition, 3 letters that you have provided
Yes,
as
Your
well. I reviewed those as well.
Your Honor, I'm going to hand up a few certificates that Ms. President. They can just be made part of the record there.
Okay. Are
And
these
no
okay
further
to be,
evidence.
can be part of the file, or do you need copies? We can make copies of them if you'd like.
That'd be fine, Your Honor.
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
make copies. All right, let me just review them, please. All right, we'll go ahead and make copies of these certificates and make them part of the record as well. All right, any other evidence from the defense?
No further evidence, Your Honor.
All right, argument?
Judge, the Commonwealth in this case, as the court is aware, made a recommendation, and the Commonwealth stands by that recommendation.
All right, argument, Mr. Campbell?
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, the 2 witnesses that you heard from today made it clear that hearing the truth was valuable to them, to the Ryan family, and it was the truth that Juliana spoke at trial. And ultimately, it was her testimony that likely resulted in the conviction of Brendan Banfield. Until her cooperation, the Commonwealth had only a theory. They had circumstantial evidence, but no direct evidence. When Juliana finally came forward, she offered that direct evidence of what crimes she'd been involved in and what crimes were committed by Brendan Banfield. Your Honor, our position is that justice requires that the court follow the joint recommendation of the parties. Justice requires it because it was an arm's-length agreement made by an experienced prosecution team with the approval of the head of the office, with the knowledge of all the facts and circumstances of the case, not just the facts of the case, but issues that would be presented at trial, the presentation of evidence and witnesses, sentencing guidelines, and many other factors that the parties consider beyond what the court might realize. Justice requires it because Joseph Ryan and Christine Banfield and their families deserve justice. By accepting responsibility in this case and cooperating, we avoided 2 trials. We assured the finality of the decision in this case, and we gave the jury and the Commonwealth and the court confidence that Brendan Banfield would be convicted, as he ultimately was. Justice requires following the agreement because every individual that makes...
Following the recommendation.
Recommendation, yes,
Thank
Your Honor.
you.
And I addressed that in my memo, of course.
Yes.
Every individual that makes a difficult decision to cooperate does so with the belief that the recommendation would be followed or at least considered by the court. The Commonwealth, the courts, and prosecutors in courts everywhere in the country rely on cooperating witnesses to do what Juliana has done in this case, which is to speak to the truth and offer direct evidence of crimes, including those cooperating witnesses that they themselves have committed serious offenses. When a prosecutor makes a promise, the court ought to give it serious weight. Your Honor, I'll say I'm disappointed but not surprised that the Commonwealth didn't advocate today for the recommendation. I have deep respect for Ms. Bristler and Ms. Sands and the prosecution team. I suspect that this is frankly because of public sentiment regarding the agreement that they made.
Recommendation.
I'm going to continue to make that mistake.
I understand.